Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything. Geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond, and you can find this show here at American Freedom Radio, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, and of course, you can always find it on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. And if you are new to the show, there are, of course, lots of ways to listen. You can download it directly from my website. You can check out the AFR archives. I'm on YouTube, TuneIn, Stitcher, and iTunes as well. Quickly, I just want to thank the talented and beautiful Amy Lawless for recently becoming a subscriber of mine on Patreon. And I will have the new bonus podcast will be posted probably tomorrow. And I just wanted to encourage people to go and check out Amy's new book, which is Broadaxe. And you can find that on Amazon and octopusbooks.net. It is a poetry or a book of poetry, which I know I don't cover much on the show. But I think, actually a lot of the listeners would get a lot out of it. It's a really excellent book. There's a whole section about, Timothy McVeigh and the OKC bombing. And Amy also talks about, one of my favorite writers, Yukio Mishima, who I probably will be doing something on in the near future on the bonus podcast. So, definitely check that out. And of course, if you want to support my work, you can sign up to Patreon for as little as $1 a month and you get access to the bonus podcast. But, we are welcoming back on a frequent guest, my very good friend, Tom Secker, of course, the man behind spyculture.com and the excellent must-listen podcast Clandestine. But I'm sure everyone, should know who Tom Secker is. But, Tom, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Pierce. Thanks for having me back. And what was this Mighty Ducks drinking marathon that you were doing the other day?
So, there's a little, personal information. My very good friend, maybe I won't name them, but two of my very good friends, they were celebrating, their 5-year anniversary. Well, I'll say it's my friend Matt and Tyla, were celebrating their 5-year anniversary. And 5 years ago to the day, when they first sort of got together, the three of us had done a drinking Mighty Ducks marathon together. Subsequently, on their anniversary, they have people over, not all the time, but this time they had a bunch of people over, and we just got pretty hammered and ate a lot of food, and we watched all 3 of the Mighty Ducks movies. And I'm full disclosure, I'm a huge fan of Mighty Ducks. I would say D2 is probably my favorite. Followed by the first one and then the third one. So maybe sometime in the future, we can do a show on Mighty Ducks, because there's a lot to get into with that. And just as a side note, of course, the young Emilio Estevez is portrayed in the movie, by, none other than, Brock Pierce, who is a Bitcoin entrepreneur, but he is also, pretty famous for being involved in, with Bryan Singer, and a bunch of, Hollywood pedophiles. And, he was one of the people that, put a lot of money into, this company, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was like an entertainment company on the face of it, but they were also peddling, child pornography, and, they were hooked up with Bryan Singer, and famously, David Geffen, the, music producer. So there's my 2 cents on Mighty Ducks and why we should talk about it on a future episode. And I guess it's kind of fitting, of course, because today, Tom, we're going to be talking about Hollywood yet again. You and I always interested and have our ear to the ground on what's going on with Hollywood, and particularly the influence that various government agencies have in Hollywood and culture. And today we're going to be talking about a little-known sort of pseudo-government agency known as the Science and Entertainment Exchange, or SEEX, which has consulted on over 1,300 films and TV shows in less than 10 years. And arguably, they have kind of taken the lead in terms of the government influence in Hollywood. And I think we'll explain a little bit about that later. But of course, Tom, you did an excellent podcast that we'll link up to in the show notes talking about SEEX. But I guess before we kind of get into that, explain a little bit what is SEEX and its connection to the National Academy of Sciences and what's going on with SEEX right now.
Okay, so they're an entertainment liaison office, in effect. They don't call themselves that, but that's what they are. That's what the Science and Entertainment Exchange is a kind of Hollywood liaison and outreach program set up by the National Academy of Sciences, who are, to be sure, a non-governmental agency. But the problem is they get most of their funding from the government, and their primary role, apart from being like an honorific society who give awards and whatever, their primary activity is actually writing advisory reports for the government. And if you watch some of the presentations that Anne Merchant, is that her name? She's like I think the press director of the National Academy of Sciences. She is the overviewer of SEEX. She says, well, we're supposed to be a sort of non-partisan and non-advisory and all the rest of it, but she says she doesn't actually believe that because, of course, they do make recommendations. They are advocating for certain things, and therefore the whole notion of them being non-partisan, non-advocacy is nonsense. She admits that herself. So you're left with this rather ambiguous organization, and what are they doing in Hollywood? What's the purpose of this? So in 2007-2008, they set up the Science and Entertainment Exchange, like I say, their entertainment liaison office in Hollywood. And this is just like with the Pentagon. They say, oh, this is just some, little thing that is run only by a few people, and we don't really have that much of an influence on anything, and we're primarily concerned with, just getting accuracy in there. We just want more accurate science in Hollywood films, which on the face of it is ridiculous. I mean, when was the last time you saw a Hollywood film that actually embraced accurate science? It doesn't happen. That's not what Hollywood's about. They create fantasies. That's their whole job.
Exactly.
And fair enough, that we shouldn't be looking at Hollywood saying, oh, why isn't your science accurate? Why isn't your this and that accurate? That's not really what they're about. And yet this seems to be the excuse that CIA, NASA, Homeland Security, the Pentagon, and now the National Academy of Sciences are using as their excuse for getting their foot into the door in Hollywood and trying to get some influence on these scripts and stories and screenplays and so on. And so that's who SEEX are. I mean, I kind of came up with the word SEEX. Because
is that not really the official...
Well, they abbreviate Science and Entertainment Exchange to SEEX, but they never call it SEEX. That's just kind of like, how else would you pronounce that?
Right, yeah.
And it's difficult to just say the Science and Entertainment Exchange every single time because it's a bit of a mouthful. So yeah.
Well, that's fine. We'll call it SEEX. Tom, I mentioned before that they're sort of like an extension of the National Academy of Sciences. And what is the National Academy of Sciences? Because they're, I guess, sort of like SEEX, they maintain that they are a non-profit private NGO, yet the National Academy of Sciences and SEEX get most of their money from the government, correct?
Yeah, about like 70% comes from the US Congress, because they are, in effect, a government advisory scientific body. So how exactly they're supposed to be an NGO? It's sort of like, yeah, but you wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the government. So how does that make you an NGO?
Yes. And then, of course, they also just take money from, foundations. I think the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which has been around forever. And, of course, big corporations. So, again, even if it's not quite the government per se, they're all government-friendly organizations that are giving money to them. And as I was saying, and as you lay out in, I think it's episode 131 of Clandestine, they've consulted on 1,300 films and TV shows in a short amount of time. They've only been around for a few years officially, and now if you take them at face value, like if you listen to Anne Merchant or Rick Lovard, who's the CEO or the head of SEEX,
He's the guy who's actually sort of running it on the ground. Yeah.
They maintain that, they don't really have any control over what goes into the scripts and things like that. And I guess this would sort of set them apart from say, the CIA or the Pentagon, which certainly has massive control over scripts. And as you and I have laid out on many shows before, I mean, sometimes you've got the CIA writing scripts for movies. Of course, Chase Brandon, our favorite entertainment liaison officer, most likely wrote The Recruit. There's numerous examples of the Pentagon rewriting stuff. Is it fair to say that SEEX is totally accurate when they say that they don't get involved in script rewrites and things like that? Because again, a cursory glance of, if you listen to them, Ann Merchant and Rick Lovard, that doesn't quite seem to be the case. So, is that accurate?
Well, you have to kind of wonder, if they aren't having any influence on the scripts, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Why are they bothering to do all this? Why have they provided 1,300 consultations in the last decade? I mean, they only founded themselves properly in 2008. They've existed for less than 10 years. So the fact that they've worked on so many different things. Okay, some of that will be relatively benign and trivial stuff, I'm sure. I'm not saying all 1,300 of those had kind of major script changes perpetrated by SEEX. But they say, we're just a sort of link-up organization, that they offer a free service. They have a phone number and a website and everything, and Hollywood producers get in touch and say, we'd like to talk to a scientist about, or we're making a film about this, and we'd like to talk to some scientific experts in relevant fields. Who have you got? And SEEX will go and find them some consultants and some advisors to go and talk to about various different things, and some of that ends up in the script and some of that doesn't. But when you listen very closely, in particular to what Rick Lovard has said on a few different occasions, he's kind of made it clear that they are very much trying to get these writers to write stuff they want them to, but they don't have any real power over them like the Pentagon does. They don't sign contracts with these people, nailing them down to a certain version of the script and so on. It's not like that, but nonetheless, they have managed to make some relatively significant changes to major movies that we know about. And also just that their approach to this and the comments they make about how and what they've influenced in these scripts doesn't in any way match up with their stated mission of trying to get more accurate science into movies and also trying to sort of promote scientific careers in general. That a lot of the time, that's not really what it's about. It's more about, a variety of different consequences, and therefore motives seem to emerge for exactly why they exist and what they're doing. And we shouldn't overlook their relationship with the Pentagon. That's the other thing that really bothered me, is that when I learnt about them, I thought, okay, they're just basically a bunch of nerds promoting science.
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay, that's an agenda in Hollywood, and it's worth paying attention to that, but it's not of massive consequence unless they're doing something more nefarious. And then I started going through all these different presentations that members of SEEX have given, and also the Entertainment Liaison Office reports that I've got under Freedom of Information requests. And SEEX turn up quite a lot. And it seems that they've, more than any other organization in Hollywood, they've really nailed the ability to get high-ranking people, big producers and writers and people from CAA and William Morris Endeavor and so on, get them in a room, get scientists in there, and get them talking about, okay, well, can we do a movie about this? Or, what about this idea in a movie or a TV series? And that they're very, very good at networking, basically. And when you look at Rick Lovard, you think, yeah, he probably would be pretty good at that. He's quite an affable guy. He seems quite well presented and well spoken. I can see why people get along with him. I can see why he's been able to get his foot in the door so much. And it seems the Pentagon have noticed this and gone, oh, we could use this. We could make use of this organization that's supposedly a non-governmental organization's entertainment liaison office. So now you have SEEX helping the military arrange tours of military bases and Navy submarines and all sorts for, again, high-ranking producers and writers and all the rest of it. in order to try and pitch them ideas, in order to try and, as Rick Lovett puts it, get them to write for us. So, and we know from a lot of these military reports, you know, this is something the Pentagon have been trying to do more of in recent years. They've really got on the, you know, what kind of outreach opportunities are there? How do we get to talk to more people? How do we get more of our agenda into these scripts at an earlier stage? This is very much something they're focused on. And lo and behold, Science and Entertainment Exchange turn up on the scene, proving very, very adept at this whole, you know, Hollywood socializing and networking thing. And, you know, you've got even, I think it was even the head of the army, the chief of the army, was meeting with people from SEEX, or at least being told about them, and he was saying, you know, this is an organization we should be getting more involved with. They seem like they're a good bunch that we can use. So that's where you really start to see, I think, some of the more nefarious, more ugly side of this organization that otherwise, like I say, appears sort of quite pleasant and benign on the face of it. Their logo and everything, you know, the way that they pitch themselves is so kind of, oh, we're just sort of, you know, nice, happy bunch of scientists who want to get a bit more good science into movies. That's all we're really about. But there's a lot more to it than that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and like, you know, they one of the presentations that you take some clips from on the podcast with Rick Lovett, you know, he mentions, for instance, when he's sort of talking about, you know, yeah, like you said, this sort of benign organization, you know, our number is 844 need psi. That's like their, you know, so you could just call them up and ask them you know, questions, and you know, they're just sort of out there, and they run these they call them salons throughout Hollywood, where basically they go to like a celebrity's house, like Seth MacFarlane or so, you know, some big time producer, and there might be like 50 or 60 people, and they give like a presentation. And you know, Ann Merchant is always sort of talking about, you know, we take these cool hip, you know, astrophysicists, and you know, and you get to have wine and network, and you know, and you ask questions, and our Q&As are always go on for hours and hours, and this seems to be one of their major approaches, at least in terms of getting these people interested in SEEX. But as you say, there does seem to be a more nefarious or sinister reason or objective with SEEX, and certainly their promotion of the Pentagon is quite unnerving. And it's weird the way Rick Lovett kind of talks about that, because he doesn't you know, come out and say, you know, we're working with the, you know, he just, oh well, yeah, we consult a lot with the military, or we have a good working relationship with the military. But again, I'm not quite sure, you know, what is SEEX doing organizing these like all access tours for Hollywood bigwigs to go to some secret Air Force base like out in Alaska somewhere. You know, what the hell is the science behind that? You know, how to bomb people better? You know, they get to show off precision guided laser mounted missiles or something. And just quickly on the sort of, we don't rewrite scripts. I mean, it's funny to hear Rick Lovett talk about this, and then like a few minutes later in this presentation, he talks about the fact that SEEX changed Natalie Portman's character in the Thor movies from a nurse to an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, and then SEEX they orchestrated this, I guess with Disney, this whole campaign around Natalie Portman and trying, you know, you can be, you know, just like Natalie Portman, and, you know, you can be pretty and become an astrophysicist, and don't, you know, I guess one of the implications of this, or the implied idea is, you know, don't be a nurse, you know, become an astrophysicist, because that's way more important. You know,
well, as Rick Lovett tells the story, because some people might look at that and think, oh, well, that's a fairly trivial change. But think of it like this. In the original comic books, that character is a nurse, and there is no problem with that as far as the story is concerned in the comic books. So why even bother to change it? And it seems to have come about when they were saying, oh, well, yeah, but what would she be doing out in the middle of the desert when Thor arrives from Asgard, from the other realm? And it's like, well, who cares? She's on her way home from a party. She's on her way home from work. She's a nurse going to work on a night shift. any number of reasons. I mean, come on, you're Hollywood writers. Surely you can come up with this stuff.
Yes.
But no. SEEX got in there and say, oh yeah, but what if we make her an astrophysicist? Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? And what if she then starts giving this lecture about astrophysics in the middle of this comic book story about Thor? And you start to think, do they even care about, like, making an entertaining movie, for example? Or is it just about, let's try and force some of this stuff in there, because that's what we want to see in this movie. We want to see, we want these people to hear this stuff. And also, like you say, then they followed up with Disney, and they've done this a couple of times with different movies, where Disney, the Science and Entertainment Exchange, and Marvel have essentially joined forces to try and promote science, technology, education, and mathematics careers, STEM careers, primarily to young women, or, teenage girls, essentially, and say, wouldn't you want to be like this? Wouldn't you want to be, a glamorous, rich, beautiful astrophysicist?
Yeah, 'cause there's so many of them out there.
Yeah, because that's such a sort of realistic aim for so many people, isn't it? That's sort of, because that's really the barrier to young women entering into science careers, is that there aren't enough astrophysicists played by Natalie Portman in Thor movies. I mean, what planet are these people living on? They're living on, Hollywood liberal do-gooder elitist planet, where they're completely detached from reality and why it is that actually so many young girls don't become astrophysicists. Did they ever actually stop and ask that question, or did they just say, oh, well, we want to try and magically make this happen, so let's stick it in a Thor movie? And yeah, like you say, my big problem with this is what's wrong with being a nurse? Isn't that quite a good career to be promoting to young women? Is to say, it's a responsible career that requires an education and proper training. It, isn't particularly well paid given the actual nature of the work, don't get me wrong, but, it's a respectable career. It's a very respectable career because it's actually an important job. A more important job than being an astrophysicist, I care to say.
I was sort of thinking I was just in my head, like you're on a plane and, I don't know, someone keels over, and is there a doctor here or a nurse? I mean, but no one's like, this guy just had a heart attack. Is there an astrophysicist on the plane that can explain,
there's not
string theory?
Emergencies in astrophysics, are there?
Yeah.
Not a lot of lives getting saved there, whereas nurses actually save lives all the time.
Yeah, constantly. That's their job.
Kind of, yeah. I just felt that whole thing, it smacks again of, like I say, that sort of elitist liberal attitude of, well, you're kind of quasi-feminist, aren't you? You don't really believe in valuing women for the things that they offer the world. You just want to kind of tell them what to do, which to my mind isn't deep down very feministic. So they're kind of hypocrites who are full of crap.
Well, and on that line of being kind of hypocrites and faux feminists or whatnot, there's like this weird undercurrent too. Ann Merchant kind of had some sort of nasty comments about the portrayal of scientists, that we see in pop culture and Hollywood films, and she states like explicitly that one of the goals of SEEX is to make sure that there are no scientists that are portrayed as dorky or people with living with Asperger's or autistic, with their pants up high. Basically, no, we want Natalie Portman, we want hot models that are working out and they go surfing on the weekend. Those are the scientists that we're trying to appeal to. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, I guess, but, it's also kind of a slap in the face to all the dorky scientists out there who may have Asperger's or may not. No offense, but, that generally happens to be who science, my aunt is a scientist and, she doesn't look like Natalie Portman, she doesn't act like that. Most of her friends that are scientists aren't like that. You know what I mean? It's not to say that they're all like dorks and, nerds and, they can't but communicate socially, but it's the reality of it. You know what I mean? Tall guys play basketball, big guys play football. That's how it is,
People who can run fast quite often do well at that kind of thing. Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just like, horses for courses, really. But, and you have to wonder, what kind of message are they actually sending to the kids who are thinking about becoming scientists? Because a lot of them are awkward, insecure teenagers, right? At least their target market in terms of the sorts of films that they work on. Most of these are aimed at teenagers. Well, most teenagers don't want to think that in order to be the thing that they're trying to become in life, you have to be beautiful and glamorous and rich and all the rest of it. You don't have to be Kate Winslet in Contagion. You can actually be completely ordinary looking, or even quite ugly, and still be a very good scientist. It's not really about that. And yet, as per usual, this organization have gone out to Hollywood and they've got caught up in the Hollywood bubble. They've sort of lost their grip on reality and moved into this Hollywood bubble world where everything is unreal fantasy. And they think, oh, well, how, imagine if it was like this. Imagine if scientists were like that. Let's put that into a film. What? That does absolutely nothing in terms of actually promoting real scientific careers to real kids watching these movies. If anything, it's counterproductive. And it's like, who's overseeing this? Who's responsible for this? Who's judging whether this is effective? Or are they just really enjoying hobnobbing with Hollywood bigwigs and, flashing around in the entertainment industry thinking that they're doing good when in fact they're not? It bothers me because, again, it smacks of a set of values that are detached and unrealistic and are being implemented in a top-down way by a bunch of people who've never really had to, live and work in the real world, don't really know what real people are like, and from what I can tell, don't seem to actually value real scientists that much. And okay, there's plenty of scientists out there doing things that I'm pretty skeptical of, to be honest, but that's not their approach. That's not what they're saying. That's, they're not coming from the same place I am. But at the same time, I respect there's quite a lot of scientists out there doing all kinds of useful things. So why not maybe try and incorporate a bit more of that into scripts rather than this nonsense with, like, Natalie Portman? I mean, isn't that what they said their stated mission was?
Well, and then it kind of brings you to this point where you're like, are you actually promoting science, or are you just promoting scientists, or this idealized version of what a scientist is? Because there's also just some dumb questions that, SEEX seems to be concerned with. I mean, you point out on the episode, I mean, there's this thing with Watchmen where they're like, well, why is Mr. Manhattan or something, why is he blue? And, they sent some astrophysicist there to explain why this guy he's blue because he's an alien. I mean, we were talking offline. I mean, you said, why is the Hulk green?
Who cares?
Right, exactly. Who really cares?
He's a green rage monster smashing some stuff. Yeah. That's your film, That's what you're trying to make here. And if you do that, people will be happy. That's sort of, why make it any more complicated than that? But no, it's sort of, we've got to try and incorporate some, not science, but pseudoscience into this. Because what Anne Merchant actually said was that this, the consultant went and spoke to the filmmakers, and they were like, oh, well, if the rules of physics were like this in your comic book universe, then he could be blue for this reason.
Yeah.
What does that do to promote accurate science or scientific careers?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's not science.
It's a romanticized, idealized version of science and scientists. It is ultimately science fiction that they're promoting. And this is what I mean. Again, they went out to Hollywood, they got caught up in that bubble, and they found themselves promoting science fiction instead of science fact, which does absolutely nothing to protect the reputation of science and scientists or encourage people to go into those careers. In fact, it makes it look like, well, unless you're going to do something magical, like turn people's skin blue, or, cure AIDS or something, all while having perfect hair, then what's the point? Why bother being a scientist? Unless you think you're capable of doing these incredible, wonderful, amazing, outrageous things, then when in reality a lot of science is quite sort of tedious and procedural and takes a long time and quite a lot of patience and persistence to get anywhere, But none of that.
You could spend your life and never actually, not
make the breakthrough that you're trying to. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scientists out there trying to cure cancer that, they're going to die well before that happens.
They're going to die of cancer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, it's just the reality of
very dark joke.
No, but I mean, it's true. I mean, that's just the reality of the world we live in. Again, there's almost like this sort of like hyper reality going on here. Where, SEEX is, they're sort of taking us out of the reality of the world we live in and kind of presenting us with this Hollywood sexed up version of reality and a sexed up version of like what it means to be a scientist. And that's not that's kind of a disturbing idea. Why would someone even want to do that? Why would you want to, present people with this false sense of reality, when, as you said, I mean, it's dark, but, this is the world. This is reality. We should accept it. And I normally, I think that's why Hollywood films are fun. They are an escape. But it's one thing to make a Hollywood film that's an escape, and it's another thing to make it an escape, but sort of hang this idea out there that like, well, this could be your life, even though it's not, I mean, I'm sure it's wonderful to be one of these SEEX consultants. You get to fly around, LA and New York and other places. You get to go to celebrities' houses. I'm sure they're paid relatively well to consult on these movies. And they live in a complete bubble, as you said. But that's not real. That's not actually the life of like a dorky scientist, who reads comic books. That's just, and moving on a little bit to some of the more sort of like darker stuff. Talk about Esri and covert affairs, because this was like, I mean, first off, covert affairs. I think you described it as a low rent knockoff of Homeland, and that is entirely true. Down to the main character is blonde, just like Carrie, and it is like a garbage show. But I mean, this was sort of one of these weird things where it's like, I'm sorry, is SEEX just totally benign? I mean, explain their relationship with this particular episode of Covert Affairs.
Okay, so, I mean, this goes back to your question before of why are they doing this, given that their obvious overt reasons for doing it aren't their real reasons. And it seems to be not just to promote, as we were just saying, this romanticized version of science and scientists, but whether consciously or not, to promote technocracy, political technocracy, and the authority of science in that sense, both in terms of the military, showing off the fantastic next generation military hardware that means that we can deal with any whatever that comes our way. But as you mentioned with Esri, also the surveillance state, the NSA and CIA side of technocracy, in that, okay, so this was at one of their salon meetings in some mansion in the Hollywood Hills. One of the things that seems to have come out of this was that, I can't remember the exact details now, is that, anyway, the producer of Covert Affairs crowbarred in a reference to Esri, this surveillance technology firm, into an episode of Covert Affairs in order to effectively promote them. And you think, again, is that about promoting science? No, not really. Is that about promoting scientific careers? No. Is that about promoting a technocratic society? Yep, sounds like it. Which isn't what they said they're doing. This is supposed to be a non-political, non-governmental organization, and yet they're promoting a political narrative. That, superior technology makes us a superior nation and means we can build a better society and so on. Well, that's a lot bigger an idea, and a much more propagandistic idea, and one that we should be pretty skeptical about, in my opinion, than they claim to be promoting. And so in this episode of Covert Affairs, there's basically some guy's gone missing, someone's been murdered.
Yeah,
I can't even remember exactly, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no, it's garbage.
And there's a line where one of the CIA officers says, he was using this technology from Esri, which is this very complex, like, landscape mapping. You use satellite photography and GPS, and you figure out wind patterns and so on in order to try and think, well, if something, if a balloon went up here, where might it have landed, for example? You could use it for that. It's pretty complex stuff, I'm guessing, or at least from what I've read about it. And I don't know if the CIA actually used this. Does it even matter? But I do know that Esri did merge with a company that was founded by In-Q-Tel. Mm-hmm. So they have their own little CIA connection. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if they were contracted to the CIA for some things, since this is the sort of software and technology that CIA would want to use. Certainly the NSA and military intelligence, one would assume it would be even more valuable. I mean, if you're planning a, military operation on the ground, then being able to model short-term weather conditions and so on in a particular area, very, very useful. So that's who Esri are. And yeah, Covert Affairs is another CIA-sponsored show. Now, obviously, Rick Glover didn't mention any of that, but you've got to wonder, does he know this? Doesn't he know this? Is he doing this consciously? Or is it just that, because that's the world that they've come from, that they think technocracy, they actually just believe in that, so they end up promoting it almost by default. And just like I say, so very, very different from their stated mission and where they started. And yeah, I'm not actually recommending anyone goes and watches Covert Affairs. It's a miserably poor show. It really is poor. But like you say, very, heavily CIA sponsored. So
no, and again, it's just to reiterate what you're saying there, you've got SEEX saying to the writer-producer of Covert Affairs that they should mention Esri. So again, SEEX is telling a CIA-sponsored show that they should insert a one little line about Esri, a firm that on some level has some tangential, if not pretty solid connection to the CIA, or certainly to In-Q-Tel. So yeah, I mean, it is like, I'm sorry, is this really about, making sure that young girls from the inner city become scientists? Or is this, one big kind of, everyone patting each other on the back? And
yeah, it's kind of a circle jerk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Is that really what's happening here? And also just, I mean, again, on this sort of like technocracy and, excuse me, and this sort of, terrifying science. There's also, who's this, what's her name? Alicia Jackson, who's a former DARPA employee, who gave a talk at, it was like a SEEX / like Marvel, I don't know, conference or, sort of convention. And, again, I encourage people to check out, Tom's, the video podcast, for this episode, because Alicia Jackson kind of like, I think they're sort of like pushing her to be like she has a leather jacket, she looks like an idiot. And is obviously not that cool. Yeah, exactly.
So uncomfortable in that outfit, doesn't she?
Totally,
she obviously doesn't dress like that.
No, but they're definitely like pushing, she's got some like cool jewelry on and whatnot. But yeah, she looks like she'd be more comfortable, in a white lab coat and maybe some thick glasses. But instead they've got her in like a, cool leather jacket and, she looks very stylish. But, this to me again was just this like weird, it's fine if you want to promote science. I'm even kind of fine if you want to support, promote, the military's, I mean, fine. I mean, I understand, that's just a thing, but to sort of use the cover of like Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe and that, science, we're all good. And then, I mean, explain Alicia Jackson. I mean, she worked for DARPA, and she runs a pretty horrifying, she's the CTO of Drawbridge Health, which is like a pretty scary transhumanist organization. I mean, just explain this, because this one to me was like even worse than the Esri sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, that's partly why I left it to the end of the podcast, because in my searching around on this, that was possibly the most kind of weird, chilling thing. And no one's watched this. You look up this video on YouTube, it's been watched by like 200 people.
Right, of course.
And so it kind of makes you wonder. The Science and Entertainment Exchange seem to be great at outreach in Hollywood, but their YouTube channel is watched by nobody. No one's keeping an eye on them and what they're up to. except, nerds like us. But, okay, so Alicia Jackson, like you say, former DARPA employee, and she worked on DARPA in, advanced biometrics, stuff like that. So she was involved in how do you incorporate AI with human minds of actual real soldiers? How do you... Essentially, she was kind of involved in making super soldiers, or at least developing technologies for potentially making super soldiers. And then she left to become CTO of Drawbridge Health. And she gave this presentation at the Science of the Marvel Cinematic Universe event, which I don't even know how you describe. It's some sort of convention. Basically, they have a load of props and stuff from Marvel films, and these are set up in a museum, as if these things are real.
Oh yeah, and they keep calling. They say you can see costumes and artifacts. It's like they're props.
Yeah, they're not artifacts. They're not real things from a real universe. They're props from a movie. And NASA did the same thing. They had a whole Captain America Avengers thing in New York a couple of years back that NASA heavily sponsored. Very, very similar sort of thing. And I think the Science and Entertainment Exchange were also involved in that. But so you have them, like I say, going to this almost museum exhibit of fictional stuff. And then they sit down to watch a bunch of scientists discuss the supposed science fiction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as though it's real. What?
Yeah.
Why would you even do this? What do they even think they're accomplishing? But I'm going to get into this I think in greater detail in this film that I'm making. But in particular, Alicia Jackson, she gave this really weird presentation where she's talking about the ability to develop superpowers, in effect, and how one day there will be, we hope, this ability to temporarily give yourself superpowers, and that this would involve interfering with embryos when they're gestating, interfering with their DNA in order to insert a bunch of things into the genome that could then be switched on or off later in life, so you could activate superhuman vision or whatever.
Fly
strength.
Or something, yeah.
Whatever it is that you think it's possible to do that way. And that these would become like a consumer product, almost. And then you look at the name of her company, Drawbridge Health. And doesn't that sound, again, very elitist? It sounds like we're going to be the ones hidden behind the drawbridge with the superpowers, while all of the rest of you plebs are, skirting about the post-apocalyptic landscape starving. I mean, that's the sort of image that it conjures up. And when you watch her presentation, that seems to be the world she's trying to conjure up. That actually she wants to live in that world. She even says at one point that she considers herself to have superpowers.
Yes.
And that, she is Superwoman. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what? Has she just lost it?
Also, Superwoman is DC, not Marvel, if you're, comics.
A little bit of a faux pas.
Yeah.
Well, she obviously doesn't know that much about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
No.
I mean, she did, if you watch her on the video in particular, but even if you just listen to it, you can hear the tremble in her voice the whole time. And you can tell she is not comfortable doing this. She's kind of been dropped into this scenario without really having a clue why she's there. Which does, of course, beg the question, why is she there? Why would you get a former DARPA employee who's now working on developing human superpowers, presumably for use by the military in the future? Yeah. And why would you get her to come and give a presentation to a bunch of Marvel fans? Are they really all that into that kind of stuff? And it seems like, to me anyway, after the Pentagon fell out with the MCU on the Avengers, and they've only worked on one film since then with them, they had to find another way of using the Marvel Universe to their benefit. After all, it is the biggest cultural franchise on Earth in the last 10 years or so. They weren't just going to walk away from that. So this seems, to my mind, to be the back door or the side door, that this is how the Pentagon is managing to get a little bit of their agenda into that culture and promote at least a little bit of what they want to see promoted in Hollywood through the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that SEEX are just like, I don't know, kind of a middleman. A front for that, a middleman for that. They're doing this on their behalf. They're helping them do it. And again, so far away from their stated mission, and that I felt, more attention needs to be paid to this organization. That's why I did the podcast, and that's why I'm going to focus a big chunk of the film on them, because no one's putting this together. No one's keeping an eye on them, and they're doing some serious stuff and helping with the CIA and the Pentagon's some of their darkest agendas. And that's not something we can just overlook.
No, absolutely. And not to toot our own horns, but, we kind of talked about this, at the close of, the second season of the CIA in Hollywood, that we believed that, in the future, there would be more and more, that when the government wants to get involved in films and stuff like that, there will be some sort of intermediary, whether it's, McClarty Associates,
McClarty Media with Richard Parry.
Or using SEEX, this benign, lovable bunch of, dorky scientists, yet they're talking about, this sort of transhumanist DARPA agenda of creating, superhumans, that will probably, lord over, us plebs, at the end of the day. And just,
she does sort of imply it at one point in her presentation. She's sort of talking about, who's going to have access to this? Who's going to be able to afford it? Who's going to be able to afford the latest superpower? And the whole thing just starts to become like, okay, so this is some kind of toolkit for the rich.
Yeah, right.
It's not about helping humanity thrive. Sorry, that phrase just tumbled out. It's from Silicon Valley. But in a very real sense, it's not about making people healthier or helping people, ordinary people, live their lives. It's about making the rich that much sort of more powerful than the rest of us. It's about reinforcing the status quo through science and technology, which again is this elitist, nasty, ugly agenda. And okay, people are going to have different interpretations of some of this stuff we've talked about as to how important it is. Fine, fair enough. But that's the part of it that I don't see why people would disagree with, that there is something deeply worrying about that sort of agenda with the, in keeping and in relation with these sorts of organizations, the DoD and the CIA and weird transhumanist technology companies. That sort of thing, that's worrying. That's dark. That could end very badly for the whole human race. So that's not something to just be trivialized, even if some of the other stuff you might think, what does it matter? Some of it, I'm sure quite a lot of the time SEEX aren't doing this. They're doing things that don't really matter, but they're also doing this.
Well, and again, this is something we've talked about before. I mean, it's more than just films. I mean, if they were just, helping and consulting, there wouldn't be all of this sort of baggage along with it. And this is not about science anymore. It's not about, because again, it's not about portraying accurate science. Instead, let's have, some transhumanist DARPA employee talking about creating, superpowers. I mean, come on. That's not, about the astrophysics of, I don't know, wormholes or something like that. I mean, now we're kind of...
It's utopian science fiction or even dystopian science fiction. That's what they're really doing. And that, once more, just to re-emphasize, is quite dark and not what they claim to be doing. And just generally, any organization, particularly in Hollywood, who claims to be doing one thing and is actually doing another, just bothers me. You know, on a personal level, the dishonesty. The fundamental dishonesty of almost everything that goes on in Hollywood just kind of pisses me off. So that was another reason why I did an episode on this. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And again, I encourage people to go and listen to the full episode 131 on Clandestine, all about the science and entertainment exchange. I mean, there's more to it. And Tom does a better job on the podcast of kind of laying all this stuff out. And it's a quite funny podcast too. You have some wonderful one-liners there, particularly talking about, just their stated objectives and goals and how this kind of differs and why it's so terrifying. And we're running up towards the end of the hour. And Tom, you just mentioned there before you're working on a new film, and plug that a little bit for the listeners, because I am very excited about this new film that you're working on. So tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Well, essentially, I'm looking at the Pentagon and the Science and Entertainment Exchange, and taking a somewhat more abstract and philosophical approach and asking, okay, we can cite various specific examples of the influence that they've had on films and TV, but what's the big picture? And the big picture is the attempt to use entertainment to reassert the authority of the state, and not just the state in the sense of the government, but also big corporations, and also the sense of shared ideas and beliefs, a shared perception of reality, and obviously science tries to claim the authority over what reality is and what is and isn't real. So the Science and Entertainment Exchange fit right into that. And also, obviously, those two organizations work together and are related. So I'm going to use the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the example and discuss both of these organizations' relationship with that, and look at, is this likely to succeed or fail? Is this attempt to reassert the authority of the state through Hollywood actually a good idea, or is the whole thing going to spectacularly backfire? And that's what the film's going to be about. I don't know how to summarize it better than that, and we don't have a huge amount of time. So, yeah, I'm not sure when it's going to be finished. Hopefully by the summer, but I'm not really sure what I'm then going to do with it. But I'm working hard on it, so rest assured it's going to be out at some point.
Well, and then obviously we'll have you back on to discuss that. But no, it's a fascinating topic, and it is it still just kind of gets to me that seemingly the state, and particularly the Pentagon, is sort of like hedging their bets on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That this is their, I mean, again, imagine that there are probably endless meetings at the Pentagon and at the, their, entertainment liaison offices in Hollywood and around LA, where they're like spending God only knows how many hours and time and money talking about this. And theorizing and trying to figure out, maybe, this is it. This is how we reassert our sort of dominance, as this sort of powerful entity. And I mean, you see that more and more, where like every Marvel movie, just seems to be kind of falling into that more and more. Especially, I found in a bunch of them this sort of weird, thing where like, it's like the superheroes kind of have to work with the state, they can't kind of do it on their own. Or if they do, it's sort of like looked down upon. I mean, that's sort of like part of the premise of, what's that, Civil War, right? Where you've got these two sort of factions, one that the government supports and one that the government doesn't support. So again, they're kind of implanting that idea, and it just strikes me as, again, this is like more than just, making movies. There's so much more to this. And it's just sort of crazy to me, again, that they're like, Marvel, that's it, and we're already kind of seeing, they're kind of getting their claws into DC as well, right?
Well, and all these other rival cinematic universes, the monster universe that Universal Pictures is doing, and DC as well. And one of the things I'm going to touch on, or probably dwell on a bit in the film, is that whole fiasco with the United Nations and Wonder Woman, and when they appointed Wonder Woman some kind of like woman's ambassador or some nonsense. And then the whole thing fell apart because a bunch of feminists complained about it. I mean, it really was. And then the film came out, and it was this, this very politicized film release for this comic book movie. Pretty good comic book movie as far as they go, but okay, so it's got a female lead. Fine. Yeah. Why does that have to be a big political event? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
This thing is only expanding and getting worse with time.
Oh yeah. Have you seen that? I'm sure you've seen people, just losing their minds that Wonder Woman wasn't nominated for like every Oscar. I mean, it's really? I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but I mean, it's Wonder Woman. Okay. Well, anyway, we're at the break. Of course, everyone should go to spyculture.com and check out Clandestine. Tom Secker, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
I like very much radio. You're an American institution. American Freedom Radio.
Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMOs plus testing for heavy metals makes us unique in the storable foods market. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's www.simplycleanfoods.net today.
We all know that they're not telling us the truth. So stand up for your rights, demand the real medicine, and your right to use it and grow it. This is Rick Sensen, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
American Survival Wholesale is a proud sponsor of the American Freedom Radio. And when you purchase quality products from AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, you help support this program. Our quality non-GMO foods do not contain MSG, high fructose corn syrup, or heavy metals. At American Survival Wholesale, you can choose from over 8,000 quality products, including self-defense weapons, bug-out bags, and long-term storable food at wholesale prices. We also have custom food packs available, including gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian packs. If we don't have it, you don't need it. American Survival Wholesale is a veteran-owned and operated company which also supports our veterans in need, and we are very active in disaster relief. If you would like to become a distributor, please email us at bugoutamerica@usa.com or call 818-720-0759. We offer free consultations to answer all your questions. Do it today while things are calm. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. I'll give you an example of that. When I was a little kid, if I got sick, they wanted me to go to the hospital and see the doctor. Now they want me to go to a health maintenance organization. Smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight? They never mention that part of it to us, do they? Never mention that part of it.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs, and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated. We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engage.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio. Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything: geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to to you live from New York City. Your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Porkins Policy Radio. I am your host, Pierce Redmond. If you are joining us right now, we were joined in the first hour by our good friend Tom Secker, and we were talking all about the science and entertainment exchange, this very bizarre, again, it's like a pseudo-government agency involved in over 1,300 films with the CIA, the Pentagon. They consult on a lot of stuff, and I really do encourage people to check out Tom's a full episode on that, and to kind of just keep your ear to the ground when it comes to the stuff that SEEX is involved with, because Tom and I were kind of talking there towards the end, but this is very much along the same lines that we believed was going to be happening when it came to the government's influence in Hollywood. That because it had become so sort of widespread knowledge that the Pentagon, FBI, CIA, you name it, DEA, are so deeply involved in Hollywood and ultimately in our popular culture, that they would begin using front groups or sort of contracting this out, that this is, and again, SEEX is such a wonderful front group to use when it comes to this sort of behavior, because of course, they're just a science organization. That's all they are. But anyway, I am going solo in the second hour. I think it's been a while since I've done a full hour by myself, but of course, I couldn't really convince Tom to stick around, but that's okay. Just as a point of order here, or a fun fact, Tom, myself, and Robbie Martin are going to be recording a couple of shows in the very near future. We're going to be continuing our series looking at these low-budget 9/11 B movies. So we've got two that we're going to be recording very soon. We're going to be discussing The Reflecting Pool, which is actually kind of it's a pretty good movie when it comes to low-budget 9/11 conspiracy thrillers. And oh, excuse me, nothing like a burp live on the air. And we're also going to be reviewing, if you can even call it that, probably one of the worst films I've ever seen, Able Danger, which is just kind of takes the prize. It's even worse than Operation Terror, which was the first movie we did in the series. But they're all available online. I think The Reflecting Pool is on YouTube, and you can find Able Danger on Vimeo. So definitely encourage people to check those out, especially before listening to our podcasts on these movies. And all those will be, of course, available on spyculture.com, and Robbie and I will have them up on our websites as well. So pretty excited about that. I really enjoy that we're continuing with this little series, because it's always fun to kind of talk about 9/11 in a different way, not the sort of the narrative that sort of becomes so dominant within the conspiracy culture. And of course, Robbie and Tom are just know way more than I do about it, so I always learn something. So it's always fun to have them to talk with them. But anyway. Enough, just sort of, odd ramblings there. I guess we should, I do have something kind of planned for the second hour here, but, at first I just wanted to, and this will kind of lead into what I want to talk about, but just in the past, few days we've had, several great, people passing away. And it's always weird, when, celebrities or famous people, start passing away. I mean, it seems like it happens in these waves. I was talking last, or 2 weeks ago on Chuck Ocelli's show. I was talking about, Dolores O'Riordan, the lead singer of the Cranberries, who, meant a lot to me. And, and she had recently passed away at a very young age. And then, yet again, we had another, legend in the music industry, Marky Smith, the lead singer of The Fall, which is a phenomenal post-punk band. If you have never heard of The Fall, I encourage people check out their album. I mean, they've tons and tons of albums. There are lots of different members of the Fall. Of course, Marky Smith was the lead singer and songwriter for them, but great out, Hex Induction Hour, is an amazing album. I'll probably use, a song or two, from, maybe Hex Induction Hour or another, Fall album for the bonus podcast that I'm going to be recording later today. But, yeah, he was just anyone that's at all interested in, post-punk and, the roots of it, I mean, then you need to listen to the Fall albums because they're just really tremendous, really influential. He was really big on the sort of production side of albums and stuff, and he insisted there always had to be two drummers, no matter what. So in every incarnation of the Fall, there were always two drummers, both in studio and live on stage. So, and Marky Smith is also a fascinating person. It's amazing he lived to be as long as, to live as long as he did. Just the sheer hell that he put his body through. I think he was a lifelong, smoker, drinker, and, speed aficionado, throughout his entire life. And I'm sure every other drug under the sun. But I know that, booze, cigarettes, and speed were his big three. And he was still touring as far as I know. Even with all of that. So, a big shout out to, Marky Smith. If people, some people might, if they've ever seen the movie 24-Hour Party People, which is about, it's about the factory records, and also the post-punk scene in Manchester. So, there's a Joy Division, Happy Mondays, New Order, The Fall, all of these groups, are sort of in that. And Marky Smith actually has a cameo in 24-Hour Party People. I think it's with Steve Coogan, is, in the cameo. And it's like a weird, if people should also check out 24-Hour Party People is a pretty fun movie about that whole sort of scene and how it changed and, how post-punk, how that sound, kind of translated into, the sort of like, I guess sort of like British house music, especially with groups like New Order and stuff like that. But, yeah, there's a great little cameo with Marky Smith. I think he even like looks at the, breaks the fourth wall, and looks in the camera. So, highly encourage the Fall and Marky Smith. A big shout out to them. They were, especially when I was in college, I used to listen to them all the time. But, it wasn't even just Marky Smith. We also, unfortunately had the passing of Ursula K. Le Guin, who's a phenomenal science fiction writer. She's written tons and tons of books. Left Hand of Darkness is a big one that I think that people will be pretty familiar with. That's a very famous book. She was very close friends with George R. R. Martin, and just a really amazing pioneering science fiction writer. I've never read The Left Hand of Darkness, but I just got a used copy of it that I'm going to be reading very soon. So and I might do something on Ursula K. Le Guin because she's just a really interesting person. Her book should be more widespread. And then, if that wasn't enough as well, we also had the passing of the great Robert Parry, or Bob Parry, as he was known to his friends, who is the founder of Consortium News. And, I'm sure I've mentioned Robert Parry on the show before. I've definitely, used, articles of his from Consortium News and from other things as well. Just a really amazing, true independent journalist. His work on Iran-Contra is like still cited to this day. I mean, he did some of the real, serious kind of diving into Iran-Contra. I mean, he went to El Salvador, to do on-the-ground reporting. I believe he traveled in some other places in Central America. And he was really one of the, along with, other people, later Gary Webb, of course, but in the 80s, Robert Parry was really one of the few true independent journalists that was, looking into Iran-Contra. And I believe at the time he was working for the Associated Press, which of course, did not like, that he was sort of digging, deeply into government, involvement in cocaine trafficking and funding the Contras and the sort of scarier, the continuity of government, all of these sort of very serious topics. And I believe, he was reprimanded at AP, and eventually, of course, it became he became kind of a social pariah amongst the mainstream media. And also Robert Parry's other he's great, many contributions to the world of journalism, but I would say Iran-Contra, and then also the October surprise that happened in 1980. And this is dealing with the Reagan administration's covert dealings with the Ayatollah of Iran. Remember our arch enemy. Well, Ronald Reagan and his national security team obviously had no problem calling up the Ayatollah and basically asking that he not release the hostages that had been taken back in 1979. So these are the hostages that were taken at the embassy. Famously, of course, there's Argo about some of their escape, but there were many hostages that were still being held. And Ronald Reagan and his neoconservative cabal that was surrounded him were in serious negotiations with the Ayatollah, and basically sidelined all of Jimmy Carter's negotiations in order to release the hostages, and that the hostages had to be released after the election, so basically after Reagan won. And at the time, this kind of, this was a big blow to Jimmy Carter. He had been talking about getting them released. He couldn't, basically because the Ayatollah cut a deal with Reagan and his administration. And famously, people will remember during Reagan's inauguration, on all the TVs, across the globe, but certainly in the U.S., there, I think it was on the left-hand side is Ronald Reagan, at the Capitol giving his inauguration speech, and then on the right-hand side was live video footage of the hostages being released. So you can see them getting off the plane. I forget where they flew, but, they're getting off the plane, they're hugging their loved ones, and again, the image that is ingrained in everyone's mind, Reagan freed the hostages. Even though he wasn't even in office, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't, it's not as if he ostensibly he wasn't doing anything. It was his inauguration. It's not as if he was implementing policy or anything. But, look, Carter couldn't do it. And now we've got, this, former, Hollywood actor, and not a very good one, who was, an FBI informant and, worked for the government, his whole time while in Hollywood, HUAC and all those sort of things. But we have this, idiot Hollywood actor who's gonna, the whole city or town, shining light in this, I forget the stupid phrase that he used, but, he's gonna make America great again. And look, he's already doing it, and he hasn't even been inaugurated yet. Well, anyway, Robert Parry was also very interested in the October surprise and did a lot of the real, true legwork early on, diving into this, talking with various sources, and he was able to show that this was happening. And of course, too, the whole October surprise, these weird clandestine negotiations or conversations between elements within the White House and Ayatollah Khomeini, and then cut to Iran-Contra. We're selling weapons with the Iranians, and we're using that, in cocaine sales, and we're buying weapons, we're shipping them to the Contras, and we're using it's all there. It is no surprise that Iran was so deeply involved in, the arms trade and in helping with the Contras after they already had a working relationship. And again, everyone kind of skips aside from, when you talk about Iran-Contra, it's mostly about, the Contras. It's about the cocaine. It's not about arms sales in Iran, and, where was this money coming from? Where was this money going? How were we, again, we're simultaneously working with Iran while we're denouncing them, and then it's shortly thereafter, our proxy Saddam initiates this really horrific war with Iran. But this is all sort of connected here, and so I always just find it so funny, especially when it's neocons griping on about Iran, and it's like, well, Oliver North had no problem with Oliver North working with them in the 80s. That was okay. He could work with the Iranians. He could sell coke, on behalf of the Contras. That was all above board. But anyway, Robert Parry, very influential with all of that, and really a great journalist. I mean, it's so sad to hear that he passed away as well, especially given the true importance of good independent journalists at the time. And again, too, I'll point out that the stories that Parry focused on and his tenacity as a real true investigative journalist, he became ostracized much in the same way that, Gary Webb and others too, became ostracized by the mainstream media. Because he was reporting actual facts and he was digging deep, and he was, like many people before and after him, he was getting amazing scoops. That's what's so funny with this is, the mainstream media will be angry that he's not towing the line. He's not following the talking points that we're all supposed to be using. But at the same time, too, they're also kind of pissed because, well, damn, that's a good story. That's a great, I wish I had that story. And of course, that actually takes, dedication and hard work and guts, to be able to do this. But Robert Parry, after basically, sort of being exiled from the mainstream media, I think it was around 1995, he founded Consortium News, which was, also a pioneering news outlet because it was all online. And Robert Parry was, very influential in, online media journalism. Again, like others too, like Gary Webb, who utilized, the internet in order to put his stories out there. But yeah, I mean, Bob Parry was, one of the first big people to kind of go out there and say, well, if I can't get printed in a newspaper, I'll get printed online, and it's all there and it's archived forever. And as I was saying, there's a real lack of serious independent journalists at the moment. And, it sort of reminded me, I think it was, it must have been a few months back now, but I did a bonus podcast talking about Wayne Barrett, who, he worked for the Village Voice. So obviously, not as, I don't know, it's not as independent as, running your own website like Parry did. But, Wayne Barrett, a true, real muckraking journalist. I mean, his stories still stand up, especially, his deep dives into, Trump and Roger Stone and New York politics and all of that. And, it was a real shame that Wayne Barrett died when he did, just before Trump was inaugurated. And it's equally as great a tragedy that Bob Parry is no longer with us, especially given the kind of craziness that's going on within the Trump White House. Certainly there's a real lack of serious reporting on the CIA and the intelligence state. And Robert Parry certainly would have been a welcomed voice in all of that. And more so, just the way that, it really kind of, hits me when we lose people like Parry, like Barrett, like others, of their ilk, because there's no substitute in it. There's no one that can kind of fill those shoes. I mean, obviously, I mean, there are people that I love and trust and I follow their work, and stuff, but there aren't the sort of, Parry had connections. He had great sources. He would write these amazing stories. I mean, they would be well sorted. You couldn't really, argue with. I mean, you could if you wanted to, and I'll get to, some of these, posthumous, nasty, little attacks that, on, Parry and his character. But with everything that's happening, who fills that void? I know some people thought, oh, The Intercept, that's, and that was certainly presented to us as, this is going to be the new alternative. We're Greenwald and Scahill and, we'll get those Snowden documents. And look at where The Intercept is. It's nothing. It's a garbage outlet. Greenwald doesn't even write stories anymore. He doesn't even really do interviews all that much. Scahill occasionally, writes something. It's a, modicum of interest. I give him credit for, covering the Eric Prince, private CIA, agency that he was going to build with, of course, Oliver North for Donald Trump. But, there's just nothing there. There's no more Snowden documents. There's nothing. It's just another kind of corporate, entity that churns out mostly kind of generic stuff. And that is the sort of trajectory of most media right now. I'm not going to go into NewsBud, but you know where I stand with that, and their idea of media integrity and independent journalism. And we see that more and more. And, I just want to kind of impart that the situation is getting kind of serious now. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and there's a real lack of people out there that are willing to kind of go deep on these things and to really uncover stuff. So we should really all kind of tip our hats, to Robert Parry, for everything that he has done, in order to, help expose the truth about serious topics like Iran-Contra, like the October surprise. There's lots, his coverage of the Iraq war is still phenomenal. It's a real shame. And I look out there on the media landscape, and there aren't people that are kind of stepping into that. In part, it's because, we've become such a hyper politicized, culture and nation, as a people, Americans have become so hyper politicized and so kind of partisan. And again, there's a bit of that too with, Robert Parry was obviously on the left and never hid that fact. That aside, there's nothing, his reporting is all solid. But we don't want that anymore. Again, we've entered into this realm of, and I hate saying it, but the sort of fake news or just this sort of hyper partisan biased media environment where it's not really everyone that calls themselves a journalist, is really just, some blowhard, opinion maker, or just a talking head. There's no real independence. So no one's really doing investigations. Obviously there are some people here and there, and I would count myself as someone that, while maybe is not a true journalist. I do pride myself on, laying out the facts, and stuff like that. And again, Tom Secker, another person like that. And, pretty much all the people I have on my show. But, aside from that, there's nothing. It's just this sort of endless echo chamber of people yelling at one another, and everything is a conspiracy, and we need to rely on QAnon, to give us the answers that we're searching for. Only QAnon, again, this savior, this mythical, nameless, faceless person will set us free. He's gonna tell us when Trump, starts rounding up the pedos and it's okay when Trump employs martial law to achieve his goals of making America great again because QAnon told us it's okay. Again, we don't know who this person is. It's nothing. And all they're saying is they're just sort of preaching to the choir. Nothing that QAnon is saying is tangible. Now, he might, I assume QAnon, to kind of go a little bit off topic, I assume QAnon is either working, with Trump or for Trump. And so, yes, there are some things that QAnon might say that, become sort of established fact later, but that's only because, Trump and him are in on it or whatever. But it's not as if he's presenting us with real stuff. He's presenting us with this, this prize. If we just hold on a little bit longer, this anonymous faceless entity who we don't know who. I mean, I keep saying he. I mean, it could be a woman. It could be anybody. It could be, I don't know, an alien. It could be an advanced robot for all we know, because we don't know who it is. But it's this mythical figure that's going to lead us to salvation. And that's sort of the exact opposite of someone like Robert Parry, who, was not just sort of dangling this magic fruit in front of us, this treasure that this will set us free. He actually went and did real reporting. He went to the places he was talking about. He met with people on the ground. He developed contacts over many years, and he produced solid reporting. And instead, who's filling that void? QAnon and all these whack job idiots, in the right-wing conspiracy culture that glom on to everything that this anonymous person on 4chan says, and this is going to help them. This is the truth. This is Lionel, true. I don't know if he's consciously aware of this, or if he's being paid to be this idiotic and moronic, or if he truly is just so drunk on the Trump kool-aid that he believes it. But he talks about QAnon like it's the greatest, this is the most important media story of ever. It's garbage, it's nothing. There's nothing really there. This is what counts for journalism nowadays. Anonymous people on 4chan talking absolute nonsense. But that counts, that's the important media story. And then all of the good right-wing, internet, armchair pundits should all be talking about that, not about the great Robert Parry passing away. And on this sort of note of nastiness and attacks and whatnot, happening, there was I saw this through, I think it was Robbie Martin, or it might have been JP Satili had commented, but Prop or Not, the wonderful again anonymous website and Twitter account. People will remember Prop or Not. They came out with their, I think it was in 2016, about this list, their blacklist of 200 websites which were identified as Russian propaganda outlets. And again, nobody knows who Prop or Not is. Nobody knows who's behind them. I mean, it's obvious that they're some sort of extension of the government. And of course, Prop or Not, promotes all of the government-friendly so-called, media outlets like Bellingcat, Elliot Higgins, and people like, of that, I don't know, nature. But Prop or Not also named Consortium News and singled out Robert Parry as, one of the, he was a real horrible person and evil and whatnot. And there is I'll link up to it in the show notes, a very interesting article that was published on January 28th, 2018 on Consortium News called Unpacking the Shadowy Outfit Behind 2017's Biggest Fake News Story. And I don't believe this was actually written by Robert Parry. I think it was written by George Eliason. But it's a Consortium News article. But it's very interesting, and it kind of goes into who's behind this. And again, people kind of forget, Prop or Not. This whole question of like fake news, it's like the chicken or the egg, who kind of use, because of course Trump and the right wing loved, everything is fake news. But at the same time, you had, Prop or Not, this supposedly, left leaning or liberal sort of outlet. They were using fake news, and now of course everyone uses fake news. But certainly Prop or Not was sort of one of the original kind of purveyors of this whole phenomenon known as fake news. But anyway, Prop or Not, I think it was it was either the day that Robert Parry passed away or maybe it was the day after. They sort of quoted, they did like the quote tweet talking about, it was a Consortium News tweet saying, basically promoting this interesting article and talking about how silly Prop or Not is and why they're really, the bad guys in this whole thing. And then Proper Not tweets back, this is just after Robert Parry dies, quote, "This completely wrong story is an appropriate tribute to Robert Parry's legacy of spreading lies in the service of brutally corrupt regimes that are at war with us. He is, no doubt, hot bunking it in hell with Lord Haw Haw. Good riddance." So, I mean, I didn't even know. I was actually fairly shocked that this Twitter account was going to kind of go to those sort of lengths. And really, again, I mean, he just passed away. I mean, and you know, he is survived by, I think he has like 4 kids, you know, a wife, you know, family, friends, you know, I understand, you know, some of the, you know, it's don't speak ill of the dead. I mean, sometimes it's, you know, I've spoken ill of the dead. But you know, not the second they pass away. And usually, you know, and I'm being kind of a hypocrite here, but you know, usually it's because they kind of had it coming. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I'll have no problem speaking ill of John McCain or, you know, or Donald Trump or Bush or Clinton or you know, any of these people, when they you know, Obama, when they eventually go. I mean, who really cares? But again, I'm being kind of a hypocrite. But anyway, I mean, the real kind of hypocrisy or problem with this too is, you know, the good riddance, and all this. And again, it's this idea that Robert Parry is some sort of a Russian agent. And that, you know, and he supports the brutally corrupt regimes that we are at war with. Well, I don't remember being at war with Russia, but apparently we are, according to Proper Not. And this is sort of indicative of that sort of hyper-politicized environment that I was talking about a little bit earlier there. I mean, again, they're sort of implying too that Parry is some sort of a Syrian, you know, agent, that Assad is giving him money. But the real kind of thing there is the Russians. Robert Parry was a Putin apologist at best, or a Putin crony at worst. You know, he was either I don't know, helping out Putin, you know, or just being a nice guy to Putin, or, you know, if you read some of the stuff Proper Not, or some, you know, the way other people have sort of characterized this, you know, he was a Kremlin agent. He's getting a paycheck from Putin every month to write lies, you know, on Consortium News. So this is what I'm talking about here. I mean, we're not at war with Russia, you know, in any real sense. I mean, we're not involved in a ground war. I mean, maybe we're, you know, I guess you can make the case that we're sort of involved in, you know, the Cold War with Russia never ended. Okay, fine. But still, you know, this is, I mean, talk about this sort of like over the top rhetoric here. And more so, I mean, again, it's who is Proper Not? They're an anonymous group of people. We don't know who Proper Not is. We don't know who runs this account. We don't know who's behind the website. You know, we've no idea, you know, who's funding them. We don't know who's telling them what to do, all this stuff. You know, Robert Parry never lied about who he was. I mean, he was very upfront. He's Robert Parry, you know, independent journalist, the founder of Consortium News. And, you know, and it's so easy, you know, in this day and age, to just sort of, again, I mean, Proper Not acting like the Russian trolls on Twitter that they claim to despise, you know, bad-mouthing somebody. You know, reveal yourself. Who are you? You know, come out here. You know, and again, of course, it's just so typical, you know, Proper Not, their Twitter account. You know, they go and they cite Elliot Higgins and Bellingcat, some BS article that they wrote. You know, Robert Parry falsely accuses 60 Minutes Australia of using fake MH17 evidence. You know, again, because Robert Parry didn't completely buy into the idea that the Russians, or, you know, elements of, you know, the Russian GRU or something, that they didn't, you know, because he didn't believe that they shot down this plane over Ukraine, he's a Russian agent, you know, immediately. And Elliot Higgins is such a phony. I mean, again, he's literally nobody. He's a guy who just sat at home. You know, he was, for people may not know, I mean, he's like, I'm not knocking this, but he was a stay-at-home dad who had a computer. Okay. And he watched YouTube videos endlessly. And according to him, this eventually constituted him to be some sort of a missile expert in Ukraine and Syria. And, through looking at YouTube videos and static images of Google Earth, he's the most, qualified, eminent person to be talking about missiles and trajectory of missiles and, when chemical weapons are being used in Syria and all this stuff. And then, of course, he becomes a darling of the establishment. And then suddenly Google pays him a bunch of money. If you're going to use Google Maps, let's throw you a couple bucks. And he's a complete propagandist, for the establishment. And of course, it's no surprise that Elliot Higgins would, attack, Prop or Not. But again, this is the state of journalism. A journalist dies, and even if you disagree with him, okay, even if you had problems with him, and again, let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that, Robert Parry was completely wrong. The Russians are behind everything, and Robert Parry is a Russian agent who's spreading Putin's lies. Okay, fine. Let's pretend that that's the case. Prop or Not, they're not talking about his groundbreaking work in Iran-Contra, or the October Surprise, or the lead up to the Iraq War, or during the Iraq War, or any of the numerous topics that are covered on Consortium News. Because, again, they're just some bogus idiot, probably working for the CIA, and they don't want you to know about all of the great stuff that you can find on Consortium News. That's not really what they're about. They're about saying, oh, you see, he's just, is a Russian propagandist. That's it. That's the end of the story. Again, even if he was, that doesn't take away from all of the hard-hitting journalism that he did previously. You know what I mean? And this is just sort of indicative of, my whole kind of larger problem, with the sort of, the state of journalism right now. It's, I don't want to say that I don't want to say that we should embrace journalists making mistakes, but they do. That doesn't discredit everything that they talk about. You know what I mean? And again, I don't think Robert Parry is a Russian agent at all. I think he was just, speaking truth to power. And if, your only way of combating that is to, defame a man after he passes away, well, I think that shows, that just sort of illustrates what kind of a sick and twisted person you are. But again, it's just sort of like, that's it. If you do one bad thing, you're on our list. You're done. You're not a real journalist anymore. You're an agent of propaganda. End of story. Come on. Again, Prop or Not has no problem, with, mainstream, U.S. outlets that regurgitate Pentagon and CIA talking points. How is that any different? They don't, again, because they don't really care about journalism. And that's, kind of my whole point with this is that, this is not about journalism anymore. This is about controlling people's, opinions and controlling people's political ideas. It's not about actually presenting people with something different. It's not about telling people the truth. It's about maintaining it's about making sure that when the war between us and the Russians happens for real, that we'll all kind of fall in line. And just as an aside, Consortium News, winner of the 2017 Martha Gellhorn Prize for Journalism, winner of the 2015 I.F. Stone Medal from Harvard's Nieman Foundation. Again, come on. You're trying to tell me, that, he's a joke, he's bad or something. And again, too, it was ridiculous that they even put Consortium News on their blacklisted news site, because there's some real, just whacked out news sites on, just garbage. I wouldn't even call them news sites, and, it almost seemed like at random, but of course they wanted to, kind of stick it to Consortium News. And again, it was to dissuade people, I thought, maybe they put them on that list because, a lot of people are going to look at that list and they're going to say, oh, well, these are truly like fake news sites and just crazy, racist conspiracy theory sites. So I'm not going to give Consortium News the time of day. If I see that come up or if someone sends me an article, no, stay away from that. Again, very deliberate sort of attack. It's about discrediting real journalism, even if it means, you have to kind of link that with these garbage people. But, I found it, very petty, very nasty, kind of small-minded, vindictive thing to do. Again, this is a man, he just passed away, and to decide to defame him in such a nasty manner. And again, it's not about any of the other stuff that Robert Parry has talked about. It's all about, he's a Russian. He's working with the Russians. He's no better than Vladimir Putin. It's not about anything that he might have done in his past. It's just the idea that, he works with all of the nations that we're at war with. And again, as far as I know, we're not at war with Russia or Syria or Iran or any of these things. So, that's proper not there. That's them inserting this, hyperbole there, this sort of crazy over the top political rhetoric. And I see that, kind of across the board. And I know I'm kind of rambling on here. I'll sort of put a pin on maybe the Robert Parry stuff. But again, it's just a true shame to lose someone, who's a real gem and a true independent journalist at a time when there is just so little investigative journalism going on. I mean, we don't know what's going on with the CIA. When's the last time we've even heard of Mike Pompeo doing something? That is disconcerting to me. Now, I think Pompeo is doing that because Liam Panetta, loved being in front of a TV screen. But the next time there's an Iran-Contra type scandal, who's going to be there to talk about it? The next time they try to convince us to go to war with a country on false pretenses, on bogus evidence, for whatever reason, who's going to be there to kind of point out these lies? Who's going to be there to go to the places where we're funding violent proxy, kill squads? Maybe in South America, maybe in the Middle East, maybe in Asia, who knows? And certainly in Africa that's happening. Congo and Sudan and places like that. Who's going to go there and uncover those lies? I don't see those people. I don't see a young Robert Parry in the making that's willing to go out there. Instead, I see a lot of people who are very angry, very close-minded, and they're willing to kind of sell themselves and sell their integrity if it makes them a buck. And I'm not sure, but I would go out on a limb and say that, Consortium News was not pulling in millions of dollars. They're not, having these amazing, funding rounds on Kickstarter and other things like that. I would assume, I'm not, don't quote me on that. But that's where, these so-called independent journalists, that they all seem to be making money hand over fist. Again, I talked about Glenn Greenwald earlier, but, he's living large. And some of these other people are certainly living large. Clicks and views on Periscope and YouTube and things like that doesn't amount to anything. That's not real. There's no substance behind that. It's just preaching to the choir. You're not actually presenting information. So very, very kind of sad that we've lost Robert Parry at a crucial time like this. Again, as I was saying, what's going on with the CIA? Who knows? We're still in Afghanistan. Remember that one? This sort of mounting rhetoric about going after Iran, going after North Korea. There's serious stuff happening right now all over the world, and we don't have people to really cover this. And this should be of serious concern. And I hope this encourages people out there who might be interested in this. Again, you don't have to go to journalism school, to write about this stuff. You can do this on your own to some degree. And of course, if you want to go to journalism school, do that. If you want to just sort of go out there and just, try and be an investigative reporter. I mean, you can go and do that as well. I have no degree in any, and again, I don't really consider myself a journalist per se, but I don't have any degree in this, but, I can still email, people and you can get court documents and, there's a lot of open source information out there at our fingertips. And it's a shame that, it's either being used for nefarious circumstances or it's just sort of being ignored. It's not important. We don't need to look deep into these things because I've got 5 million viewers on Periscope every time I rant and rave about, the gay, communist, liberal, Muslim agenda. That's bogus. It's nothing. There's no substance to any of that. And that I guess brings me, around to probably the least substantive thing that you could, listen or watch today. But, our glorious leader, El Presidente Trump, is going to give his, State of the Union. I am not, holding my breath on learning anything or hearing anything new. But it is a big event. It's the State of the Union. There's always a sort of, who's coming, who's skipping out on it. It is sort of like the red carpet award ceremony of, Washington DC, the State of the Union. But none the same, I know I've already seen, the QAnon people, talking about, he's gonna, there's gonna be some cryptic message in what Trump says tonight that's gonna be directed at Hillary Clinton and the satanic pedophile rings and, the CIA and of course the deep state, the ever-present deep state is going to be mentioned, during this speech, and it'll be coded, of course, it'll only the true, patriots, that spend most of their time on YouTube, they'll be able to decipher, what these secret messages that Trump is laying out. But, for the rest of us, I'm not expecting, much of anything. Although, I think there will be some interesting stuff, to keep an eye on during the State of the Union. One, of course, being that, our lovely First Lady Melania, this will be her first public appearance, since the Stormy Daniels revelations in the Wall Street Journal and other publications. And that's kind of interesting. If Maggie Haberman at the New York Times is to be believed, Melania was really sort of caught off guard by the Stormy Daniels story. Now, maybe she really didn't know. I kind of don't really buy into that. But it is true. And I mean, she might have been caught off guard, just by the mere fact that, now everybody knows that, what was it, 4 months after, she gave birth to, Barron, Trump was cavorting with Stormy Daniels and getting, spanked with a copy of Forbes magazine, and watching, Shark Week, all incessantly, at all hours. So, it'll be fascinating to see Melania Trump there. Of course, just for the mere fact that, obviously everyone in that entire room is going to know that she's just super pissed, over the Stormy Daniels story. But, I think it's also as horrible as it is, to sit there and listen to Trump, pontificate on nonsense. I do think it's important to kind of check it out. Obviously, I mean, I'm sure a fair amount of what he's going to be talking about is DACA and how, we need to get the government going again. And maybe, he might call out Schumer or the Democrats in general. But I do think it is important to sort of follow these things. Again, given that we don't have Robert Parrys out there, to be writing about this stuff. We should be concerned. I know it's like, oh God, it's only been a year. First of 4 more or 3 more State of the Unions, and it's just so taxing and draining. But, we should still be paying attention to this, blowhard idiot. If for nothing else, it'll be interesting to see what he has to say about foreign policy, especially given that so many, of his true hardcore right-wing base still seem to believe that this is the anti-interventionist, anti-war guy who's going to get us out of all of these conflicts. It'll be interesting to hear, because I assume there will be something about, taking it to Iran, taking it to North Korea, maybe some more sanctions. I mean, I know that that's kind of boring. It's like, who cares about sanctions anymore? But I think we should pay attention, because again, we've sort of seen that ebb and flow, where, there was that moment where it looked like something is going to happen in Iran. That sort of kind of fizzled out right now. So it'll be interesting to see if Trump has anything to say about the Iran protests, what's going on there. I doubt it, but, if you were to maybe give a shout out to the MEK and, Maryam Rajavi or something like that, or we're going to talk about the opposition groups that we should be supporting. So keep a close eye what he says about foreign policy, especially when it comes to like Iran, North Korea, and also if he says anything about Afghanistan. We're still there. We're still there, Mr. President. We haven't left. So, check out if he says anything on Afghanistan, if he says anything on Syria, again, given the situation in Syria, has sort of heated up again, where we've got, Turkey, obviously, not too pleased with us and some of our actions, and, that we're supporting Kurdish fighters. There's the whole, these operations going on in, Afrin in Syria, where you've got Assad, you've got, the U.S. and, Kurdish militias, and also, Turkish, military. Not to mention, there's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these things are still kind of going on there. So, keep an eye out for anything that Trump says about that, because I do think, it's still an ebb and a flow when it comes to Trump's foreign policy and what's important, and what he wants to throw his support behind. But, again, the sort of the unquiet frontier, mentality or that sort of, foreign policy agenda is happening. And it is kind of increasing, and it's in the background. And I think we might sort of see the beginnings of a true sort of formulation of Trump's foreign policy at this, at the State of the Union. And also just keep an eye on, any BS stuff he says about the economy is great. I know he's going to talk about, the Wall Street is doing, again, I thought he was, going to drain the swamp, but, Wall Street is doing wonderful, and the NASDAQ is up, and all these things mean that I'm just so wonderful and everything like that. So, keep an eye out, for what he says about that as well. And then also, listen, we might get lucky, and, he might get cottonmouth again. Maybe his dentures will fall out. That would I think I could die a happy man tonight if Donald Trump's dentures fell out during the State of the Union, or he got, cottonmouth so bad and he had to drink water, funny. That would just be tremendously wonderful. And this will be a long speech. I can't remember, I can't remember the last time he's done like a long speech. So, it'll be fun to sort of, watch and see if his mouth gets dry, if he does that weird, when he's like breathing super heavily through his nose all the time. So, all those are the fun things. And maybe we can make a drinking game out of it or something like that. Definitely I would say if we're going to do it, to get totally off topic and into the sort of silly realm, anytime he says, China, you got to drink. I think, what else would be some other good ones? If he mentions Hillary Clinton, that's that's like a chug your drink. Certainly. Anything about illegal immigrants or MS-13, you have to drink for that. If he ever uses his sort of childish nicknames for people, Pocahontas, Little Chuck, any of those things, you've got to drink during that as well. But I know I'm being kind of silly and flippant here, but pay attention to what's going on. I'm sure I will be talking about this later tonight on Chuck Ocelli's show. We might even be recording during the State of the Union. I've got to check the time on that, but I'm sure I'll be talking about that later. And just quickly, because I think we're just about out of time on the show today. The bonus podcast for Patreon will be posted up tomorrow. That is a promise. I'm going to be recording it probably immediately after this. So stay tuned for that. It'll be all posted up. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon.
No rules, no taboo topics, no fear of doom, We are American Freedom Radio.
Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMOs plus testing for heavy metals makes us unique in the storable foods market. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's www.simplycleanfoods.net today.
We all know that they're not telling us the truth. So stand up for your rights, demand the real medicine, and your right to use it and grow it. This is Rick Sensen, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
American Survival Wholesale is a proud sponsor of the American Freedom Radio. And when you purchase quality products from AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, you help support this program. Our quality non-GMO foods do not contain MSG, high fructose corn syrup, or heavy metals. At American Survival Wholesale, you can choose from over 8,000 quality products, including self-defense weapons, bug-out bags, and long-term storable food at wholesale prices. We also have custom food packs available, including gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian packs. If we don't have it, you don't need it. American Survival Wholesale is a veteran-owned and operated company which also supports our veterans in need, and we are very active in disaster relief. If you would like to become a distributor, please email us at bugoutamerica@usa.com or call 818-720-0759. We offer free consultations to answer all your questions. Do it today while things are calm. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
Assassination. You know what's interesting about assassination? Well, not only does it change those popularity polls in a big hurry, but it's also interesting to notice who it is we assassinate. Do you ever notice who it is? Stop to think of who it is we kill. It's always people who've told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon. They all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam! Right in the head. Apparently we're not ready for that. Yeah, that's difficult behavior for us. We're too busy sitting around trying to think up ways to kill each other. Here's one we came up with. It's efficient, too. Genocide, you know? Killing large numbers of people simply because they don't look like you, they don't talk like you, and they don't have the same kind of hats you do. You ever notice that anytime you see two groups of people who really hate each other, chances are good they're wearing different kind of hats. Keep an eye on that. It might be important.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs, and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated. We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, rocket count 4, 3, 2, 1.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio.